Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Sunbury Motors, North 4th Street in Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. Sports talk where your voice counts. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now from the Sunbury Motors studio, here's Steve Jones.
Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. Best product line, awesome sales staff, great service department. That's a winning combination every time. They're the pros. Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. Mark Schofield of Inside the Pylon in just a few moments. But first, our play-by-play calls of the day.
Here comes Colgate. Burns with it. 5 seconds left. Burns blows by Sotos. Steps back for a jumper up and no good! No good! No good! On senior night!
3 seconds left. The Bucknell Bison are Patriot League champions in the 2019-2020 season for the 4th time in the last 5 years. And for the 6th time in program history, the Bucknell Bison are regular season champions.
We'll start with the last one first. Joe Vasile, I'm a big fan of. I've worked with Joe before on baseball. He is a fabulous announcer, great guy, does a great job. As for Doug, let's replay Doug, and I know Mark Schofield's, but Mark, I think you want to hear this too. Replay Doug's ending.
Here comes Colgate. Burns with it. 5 seconds left. Burns blows by Sotos. Steps back for a jumper up and no good! No good! No good! On senior night!
I haven't heard anybody react like that since the suit made a sale. All right, so I love Doug. Doug is... It's all out there. And Doug is awesome. Doug Birdsong, you are awesome. We think Mark Schofield's awesome, too. Mark, thanks so much. Hope you enjoyed that. Great to have you with us.
Oh, it's great to have me on, and I did sort of enjoy that, especially the flourish at the end. A great way to finish off that call. That was pretty tremendous.
It was awesome, wasn't it? That was great.
No, that was great. Yeah.
Okay, so let's get a read now. When you're at the combine, what are you looking for? What's it's one thing for us to sit there on the outside looking in and go, oh, hand measurements and 40 times and things like that. What do you look for?
Well, I mean, more than anything else, the combine, the stuff that really matters, happens behind closed doors. It's the stuff we don't even get access to. It's what goes on in those hotel room suites when a prospect comes in and meets with ownership, meets with the front office, meets with the scouting department, and they go to sort of get a chance to interview this player during that formal interview process. And then the other important place is the hospital, actually, the physicals. These players, for example, Zach Bond, the edge defender, outside linebacker for Wisconsin, was talking to us about the physical and the process there. He said, you go there, you wait for 3 hours, you finally get poked and prodded and tested. But that's key to a lot of these evaluations from these teams, especially when you think about a player like Tua Tagovailoa and his hip injury, his history of lower body injuries. The medical evaluation process is going to be critical for him. And so, that's the stuff that really matters at the combine. The stuff we can see, well, you do sort of want to see how they move, how they test. The testing is just getting underway now with the wide receivers, the tight ends, and the quarterbacks throwing tonight. So you do want to see how they move, how they change direction, how fluid they are. And, and depending on how that looks, depending on what you see there, how they test, then it takes you back to the film. If somebody runs faster than you might have expected, you want to go back to the film and see maybe if you missed something. If somebody runs slower, well, did it really hurt them when they were running routes? Did it hurt them when they were trying to get yardage after the catch? And so when you're watching the testing as it gets underway tonight, look for the change of direction, look for the burst, the short area quickness. But really the big stuff happens behind closed doors.
Anything on the measurables that has... Wow. Made you sit back and go, okay, I'd like to look a little bit more at this guy because of the measurables?
Right, and I think the one that sort of struck people, we've all sort of anticipated that Joe Burrow is the first quarterback off the board, but then he comes in with the 9-inch hands. And people might say, well, hand size doesn't really matter at the quarterback position. And it can at times. It's another instance where you want to go back and you want to look at the film. And, for example, 2 quarterbacks last year came in with 9-inch hands. One was Drew Lock from Missouri. The other was Brett Rippon from Boise State. Now, these were both quarterbacks that I liked in last year's draft. But you see that number, and what do? You go back to the film. You want to see, do they have fumble issues in the pocket? Are they going to lose the football when they're hit? And do they have difficulty throwing in inclement weather? And when you watch Drew Lock on film, you don't see that. His last regular season game, it was a game against Arkansas in a sleety, cold, windy kind of day. He had no trouble throwing the ball. He still had zip. He still had great ball placement. But in Rippon's case, that Mountain West championship game at Boise, he was in the snow. He couldn't grip the ball. He couldn't throw it. They almost turned into a one-dimensional running team as a result, and he did have fumble issues. And so now, get that number from Burrow, you want to go back to his film. Now, he didn't have fumble issues. There's not a lot of evidence of him really playing in weather, so that might be a concern. So the hand size for quarterbacks, that is one that people will look at. And the other that people like to look at, particularly when you get up front, the offensive and defensive lines, the edge players, that length. It's why a player like Javon Kinlaw, the defensive lineman from South Carolina, is rising up boards. He has tremendous arms, tremendous length, tremendous wingspan. And he said today when he was addressing the media that the thing he's working on, the thing he's trying to get better at is how to use these hockey sticks. That's what he calls his arms because they're so big. But that length is going to let him move players around. It's going to let him push in the pocket, get those hands up. You're going to knock down some passes at the line of scrimmage. That's why a guy like Javon Kinlaw is really moving up boards.
Yeah, it's interesting because Joe Burrow's last 3 games were in domes.
Yeah, I mean, he played, playing in the SEC, playing in domes. You don't get a lot of cold, rainy, and wind. And when you think about Cincinnati, you're going to get some cold, you're going to get some rain, you're going to get some wind. So it is something to think about there.
And to the credit of Cincinnati, when you mention it, it depresses people. All right, so
right.
I want to get to a couple other guys. Justin Herbert is interesting in that there are no 2 opinions the same about him. What's your opinion of him?
Right. Well, I think he's a very impressive quarterback with the potential to be an upper-tier starter in the National Football League. But it is going to take, when you get past Burrow, when you get past Tua, when you start looking at the rest of this quarterback class, the fit and the development are going to be critical for these players. And, with Herbert, the plus sides, you get the athleticism, you get the arm talent. He has an absolute cannon for an arm, and he can make throws anywhere he wants on the field with pretty good ball placement. He can make the back shoulder throw 40, 50 yards downfield. There's evidence of them doing that on tape. The problems come in a couple of different ways. The Oregon offense is a tough evaluation when you're trying to figure out what a quarterback can and can't do. A lot of one-read throws, a lot of design throws, smoke screens, bubble screens, one-read type concepts. Not really a true NFL offense, which is why Senior Bowl week was big for him, but he handled himself well down there, showed he can run more of an NFL offense. And another question mark is this: has he sort of tapped out as a quarterback? Has he sort of hit his ceiling? Because he's got a long, experienced record at Oregon, but is there really room for growth there? And so that's what scouts and evaluators are going to figure out. But I think in the right fit, the right offense, you look at the Chargers perhaps at 6, maybe even the Panthers at 7, Justin Herbert could be a very good quarterback.
So I want to talk about the Georgia guys for a minute. Jacob Eason and Jake Fromm.
Yeah.
Eason was replaced by Fromm at Georgia, so he transferred to Washington. I know you did an extensive write-up about his ability to use the middle of the field. So what has been a pleasant surprise to you about the film evaluation of Jacob Eason in Washington?
Yeah, and it is that, that ability and that willingness to attack the middle of the field, that it might even be more the willingness than anything else, because if you think about where the college game is played right now when it comes to offenses and how they're attacking defenses, so much of it is done like we just talked about with Oregon and Justin Herbert, where they'll attack the sidelines, they'll attack near the line of scrimmage. They don't really challenge the middle of the field too much. But you watch Jacob Eason in that offense at Washington, he's attacking the middle of the field. He's making reads to attack that area. And when you look at studies that show where passes are completed in the National Football League, they're completed most of the time up the seams, right? Because you get so much single high cover one coverage in the NFL. You're going to see it a ton. Maybe you don't see it as much in college, but you still need to attack that area of the field if you're going to have success. And Eason's willingness to do it, his ability to read that area of the field, it's a credit to him and the quarterback and the development that he's gone through. And it shows you that, he's not going to have to learn that. He's not going to have to refine and develop that when he gets to the NFL, which is why I think, when he throws tonight, he's going to put on a show because he has a cannon. And I think teams are really going to like what they see, both when they see him throw tonight and they see his willingness to attack that area of the field, which a lot of other quarterbacks won't do.
Now let's get to Jake Fromm. Interesting.
Very
he's not
interesting.
because here's a guy that when he throws fewer than 30 passes in a game, Georgia has success. When he throws more than 30, Georgia has limited success. What do you think of Fromm pre-snap? What kind of difference can he make? And then post-snap, how is he?
That's a great way to frame that question because, when you think about Jake Fromm and you try to look at him from an evaluation standpoint, where he stands out is from the neck up. He's a very smart, experienced quarterback. You watch him pre-snap. He's active at the line of scrimmage. He's changing protection. He's calling out potential blitzes. He's adjusting the plays at times. They asked him to do stuff like that when he was just starting out as a freshman. They put a lot on his plate from a mental perspective. And, again, not something a lot of these other quarterbacks are asked to do. Most other quarterbacks, we know what they do before the snap, right? They look at the sideline, they see what the coaches are holding up on that big old play sheet and poster, and that's what they do. They do what the coaches tell them. But Fromm is making these reads and these calls at the line of scrimmage, so I think NFL teams are going to love that about him. Now, there are limitations to his game. He doesn't have the upper tier arm strength. He's also a quarterback that may have sort of reached his ceiling as a passer because he is very experienced. You don't know how much room for growth there is. Does he really have that high of a ceiling when compared to the other guys? Maybe not, but I think he's got a great floor as a passer. And if you look at where he could be and what he could ultimately be, a worst-case scenario from him might be, long-term backup, number 2 spot starter type guy that can get you a couple of wins if you need it, and that would be worst-case scenario for him. And so I think teams are going to love him. They're going to love him from a mental perspective. When he gets into those hotel suites, he's going to kill it on the whiteboard. And I think a team like Chicago, if they're thinking about maybe getting some competition from Mitchell Trubisky, Fromm would be a perfect fit in that offense because he makes the right decisions, gets the ball out on time, in rhythm, puts it where it needs to be, very accurate in the short area. I think he could probably run that Chicago offense better than Mitchell Trubisky right now. I'd love to see him in Chicago.
Yeah. You mentioned Tua earlier. Obviously, the focus is on the hip. I've got it. I understand that. If the one area I'd be worried about with him is that each ankle has taken a beating the last 2 years.
Yeah, that's a great point. When you look at the injury history, it's not just the hip. He had the 2 ankle injuries. He had the surgery before the LSU game, and they brought him back for that. And so it's not just the hip issue. It's a history of lower body injuries, and you wonder about the wear and tear, potential problems down the road for him.
Yeah, and that's what I look at with him. It's not, when he's throwing the ball, it's a beautiful ball, and lefties are deceptive, so it looks like it's floating, and it's not.
Right.
Okay, I want to ask about the running backs for a moment. There's some interesting backs in here, and there's DeAndre Swift, there's Dobbins, and then there's Jonathan Taylor. And Jonathan Taylor received a lot of accolades in college at Wisconsin. Saw him play against Penn State. What do you think about Jonathan Taylor as a pro?
Yeah, it's a great way to frame that question. And, this Wisconsin offense this past year, they really tried to get him involved in the passing game and to use him as a receiver more because that's the name of the game in the National Football League, right? If you're a running back, then all you can do is run the football and you can't really contribute in the passing game, whether as a receiver or a blocker. Well, given the name of the game is passing in today's NFL, you might not find a home. And so they tried to get him involved that way. That's going to be the big question mark. That's what we're going to be looking for, as he goes through the combine and this pro day, as people go back into his film. Can he really contribute, or is he a guy that you're going to have to take off the field on third down? Because if that's the case, that really sort of devalues him from a valuation standpoint, because we're seeing now running backs, unless you're like the truly elites that can do it all, that can stay on the field on all 3 downs, your Ezekiel Elliott, your Saquon Barkley's, those guys that can't do that, they get pushed down boards because it makes more sense to draft a guy that could be a slot receiver that you'll probably play more than a guy that has to come off the field on third downs as a running back.
Mark, I want to get to a couple of Penn State guys before I let you go. Let's start with this. Edge rusher obviously is going to be a premium for anybody. Chase Young tops that board. What about Yetur Gross-Matos? How do you see him figuring into this?
Well, when you look at the premium that teams place on the edge position, a guy like, Gross-Matos is going to get pushed up boards anyway, because teams need depth at the pass rushing position. It's almost like, the bullpen, right? You can never have too much pitching in baseball. You can never have too much edge rushing when it comes to the National Football League. And he's shown that flexibility where he can run the arc, he can use that athleticism, use his length, which he shows on film, but he can also teams now take edge rushers and they're willing to sort of kick them inside or have 3 or 4 edge rushers on the field on certain passing downs. And so the value of the position is going to make him a valuable asset to teams. He spoke to the media today. He talked about his upbringing and what it's taken to get him to this point, and how you almost couldn't imagine that he would be here with a chance at an NFL career. Again, when you think about him walking into a hotel suite to look at a coach, to look at a potential general manager in the eye and talk about his story and his background, teams are going to love that about him. So I think he's probably somebody in that day 2 range, but probably earlier on the day 2 side, given the talent and the need at that position that so many teams have.
There are a lot of wide receivers in this draft. In fact, half of them are from Alabama. Just kidding.
Right.
There are a lot of wide receivers in this draft. One of them is K.J. Hamler. Now, I don't think K.J. is going to run his 40 there in Indy, but he's going to run it here on Pro Day. So what can K.J. Hamler bring to the table that's going to interest some people?
Versatility and positional flexibility, at the wide receiver position. Because he's somebody that, with his size, with his measurables, how I anticipate he'll run at 40 when he does it at his pro day. He's somebody that you can use in the boundaries as well as inside of a slot. He's somebody that obviously you want to get the ball to in space because of the change of direction ability he has. He's somebody that also could look at, the third phase of the game, special teams. He's somebody that looks like he can contribute in that phase of the game as well. It is a very deep wide receiver class. Daniel Jeremiah over at the NFL Network said he could anticipate maybe 27 wide receivers coming off the board in days 1 and 2 of this draft, which would be a new record. I don't know if we get there, but with that number of players, K.J. Hamler is in a very good position where, an offense is going to look at what he can do on film. An offense is going to look at ways that you can get a player like him involved in so many different facets of your offensive attack and your passing game, and even your running game, getting the ball in jet sweeps and stuff. He's going to find a nice home. I think he's going to go very early on day 2.
Yeah. With all the depth at receiver, I've got Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb. Which one of those 3 would you pick?
Oh man, they're all great options. But
I just gave you an embarrassment of riches there.
Yeah, can I have all 3? No,
yeah.
when I look at these guys, I think all 3 are potential game changers in the National Football League. But I keep, the name of the game right now is speed. Speed just kills in the National Football League. Yeah. And Henry Ruggs, I was talking to some of the other writers and some other people around the league. People are sort of guessing at what number he's going to post in the 40 when he runs a little bit later. There's nothing he could run that would probably scare people. He's going to put up a great time, and it's going to be backed up by the film, the change of direction, the burst. You can get him one step, a slant route, get a little bit of leverage on a defender, and he can take you to the house. And that changes games in a flash. And so I think of those 3 guys, they're all great talents at the wide receiver position, but if I had to choose one of them, I'd choose Ruggs.
Mark, brilliant work. We appreciate it very much. We appreciate the time you gave us today very much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This was a blast. Enjoy the Combine. Always fun, and thanks again for having me.
All right, Mark Schofield joining us from inside the Pylon. See, this was the Mac Trillo segment where sat there, we talked about the Combine, right? All day you've been going through every single stat. Now, what bothers me is the suit sitting in the back corner office, right? And he's been measuring his hand all day. I don't understand.
Well, probably, hopefully, to throw a football.
He's just he's trying to see if he and Joe Burrow, he can make Joe Burrow money.
Yes. I thought the segment leading off with that call from Doug Bird's song. Oh, that just...
Do you have the Duggar call again? We got a Duggar call one more time.
Yeah.
Here comes
Duggar.
Colgate. Burns with it. 5 seconds left. Burns blows by Sotos. Steps back for a jumper up and no good! No good! No good! On senior night!
My question for Doug is, who won the game, Doug?
I think if you're a Bucknell fan, you don't need to hear the score.
No.
I think just how Doug reacted.
Well,
Doug, I know you're listening. I love you, brother. You're the best.
Well, I thought that the greatest call he made was 2 years ago, or maybe last year, when Colgate had Bucknell by 9 points with 30 seconds to go, and Kimball McKenzie made a buzzer beater.
Oh, yeah, that was an amazing shot.
And that made Sports Illustrated's top 10 moments one night. And the announcers on ESPN were just thrilled. They were beside themselves listening to Doug's call. But I think this supersedes it.
I definitely think so, because having been there last night, I mean, first of all, the game itself was bananas, but second of all, the crowd was the best crowd that Soik has had all year.
Yeah.
It was tremendous. It was just a great atmosphere, and I think that's what fueled the call from Doug. It certainly fueled me.
Yeah. When Bucknell did beat Colgate, I remember Birdsong's last words were, "Kimball McKenzie, you are my hero."
Yeah.
Gotta love it. Doug has to be one of the most enthusiastic announcers
No doubt.
in all sports.
No doubt.
He wears it right on the sleeve.
Yes, he does. Think the world of Doug.
Yeah. And
high, gigantic level of respect over here. So.
But, besides being a great announcer, Steve, he's a great person. He's a funny person.
Doug is incredible, and it's like, and when you get him away from his football guy, he just opens up.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Well, when Doug gets a chance to talk.
Yes.
What are you talking about? All right. We'll come back with more in a moment on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
Taking your calls at 800-795-9565. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now from the Sunbury Motors Studio, here's Steve Jones.
When it comes to stuff companies give you, I remember the suit has this big plaque that's in his office. It says, "Greed is good." I don't,
How does he get away with that?
Well, how's he been able to get this far in life?
Oh, man.
It's our guy.
He left me a message. It's cryptic. It said 8.5 inches. So that must be his hand size.
That means he cannot play in the NFL.
Yeah.
All right, he'll be fumbling left and right. I mean, my goodness, you watch him with the stapler, and he's constantly has to pick it up.
Yeah.
It's like, come on.
I didn't realize that was one of the things they now measure quarterbacks with.
Yeah, they have.
It makes good sense.
I mean, this is what they want. If idealistically, several of the guys measured with 10-inch hands, what they're looking at is, look at Roethlisberger. Roethlisberger looks like it has a meat cleaver on the ball, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think that's what they're looking for. Now, does Roethlisberger fumble sometimes? Yeah, because sometimes he holds the ball too long. But that's what they're looking for as something that you're concerned about: wet weather, inclement weather, or your ability to hold on to the ball once you get hit. And, I mean, that's why they look at it. But you know what? This is what Burrow's going to do. Rick Neuheisel was talking with Burrow. I want to say it was at the Senior Bowl. And he brought up a 4th and 17 at Texas. Big play. And Neuheisel started out by saying it was 4th and 16. And Burrow quickly corrected him and said it was 4th and 17. This was the call. This was the alignment. This was the defense. No, he had a photographic memory about the entire deal start to finish. That's what the Bengals are going to be blown away by when they talk with him. The guy that he has that much detail and retains that much information in his head. That's, I think, going to be something that impresses them. And I don't think they're going to be worried about, because, Goff has that hand size of 9. There are a couple of others as well. But that's what you're worried about. That's why they measure it. I think Burrow's going to survive. He'll be all right.
I just found that very interesting that is something. But, Steve, there's not a lot of stadiums anymore, New England, Chicago being two, that are really cold weather stadiums.
Well, Cincinnati's not in the banana belt.
No, Cincinnati, okay. First round pick. But a lot of stadiums are either domed or in warm places.
Yeah, they are, except he's going to get picked by Cincinnati. So he's going to have to sit, he's going to have to endure some cold days.
Oh,
he's
yeah.
going to have to, it's just, from Thanksgiving on usually, he's going to have to. Most of the season will be fine.
Yeah.
But, hey, let's get to basketball. My broadcast partner, Dick Jerardi, joins us. DJ, welcome back.
Hi, Steve.
Dick, it's that
Yes,
time.
sir.
It's that time of the year. I think in college football, where you need to play a Big Ten championship game, and Urban Meyer and Ohio State feel like they need to blow out Wisconsin 59-0 to get into the college football playoff. Basketball's not like that. And Rutgers did a great job in the second half, but Dick, there's some realities to this. Penn State won it.
Yeah, no, that's all that will matter in the end, Steve, is who'd you beat, when did you beat them, where was it, all those kind of things that the committee will take into account. And each time Penn State wins another game in this league, it's a quad 1 or a quad 2, and it just builds their resume up even higher. So they're in a great spot heading into the Final 3 and then the Big Ten tournament, and we'll see how it all plays out. It's hard to believe 2 weeks from Sunday is Selection Sunday, if I'm doing my math right.
Exactly. Lamar Stevens was a warrior a basketball warrior at Indiana. What did we see from him last night?
He looked to me like he was physically and mentally exhausted from the amount of games that have happened this month, the amount of effort that he's put into it. And I think, as Patrick said in the post game last night, realizing he's a game or two from the end of his home career here at the Jordan Center, and he's put in so much, he's meant so much. It was almost like he just didn't have anything last night. He was trying. It's like sometimes when you get so tired, you try and you just can't do much. But you know what? Even by being on the court at the end, Steve, he gave Miles Dredd the shot. Because Rutgers' whole defense thinking, Lamar's going to get this ball, and they end up running a play they run all the time, and a great screen from John Harrow. And Miles made the shot, but if you watch the replays, all the guys in the red jerseys are surrounding Lamar Stevens as Miles comes wide open.
There's also another element to it as well. You look at the last shot that Rutgers took. Who's the guy defending the shot? It was actually Lamar Stevens.
That would be Lamar Stevens on Yeboah. It was so crazy at the end. I frankly thought that Harper had taken the shot till I saw the replay. He had passed the ball. But, yeah, no, it was Lamar who made it difficult on Yeboah, whose shot never really looked good coming out of his hand. And he was the right guy to be on him because he was just going to make it. He was going to have his hands up. He was just going to make it a hard shot. But, yeah, and the relief on Lamar, I didn't see it live because it was, you were calling it, but it was chaos. But when watching the replay, Lamar just kind of walked slowly to half court, and let out, I'm sure, a huge sigh of relief that Penn State was up to 21 wins, up to 11 in the Big Ten, and 3 to go in the regular season. It's been really, you've done them forever and ever. Certainly in my time, this is an unprecedented regular season for Penn State basketball.
Right. I also thought, Dick, what did you think about how they defended the last 28 seconds? That's almost a full shot clock there.
Yeah, I thought it was great. A couple of things they had going for them. One is they had 2 fouls to give, so they could be very aggressive. If a foul was called, a foul was called. Not a big deal. Secondly, they made sure that there was no way in the world Geo Baker was going to get the ball or take a shot. They had been coached that way, as you said in the practice before. You just double team and make somebody else shoot it because you've seen the guy make enough big shots that you know he can do it. So why let him do it? And then they got the ball out of Harper's hands, who'd been playing well. Not that Yeboah couldn't make the shot because he's actually their best long-range shooter, but in that circumstance, you'd rather them take a long, potentially contested shot than anything where some players who are more drivers can get themselves to 6 or 7 feet. In a game where a two beats you. So yeah, I thought they played it absolutely perfectly.
All right, so now we get to the big picture of this. You go game by game in all of this, Dick. The Big Ten has been. Look, there could be 10 teams in this whole thing when it's all said and done. How have you felt in observing the conference and the depth of the conference? Is it quality depth? Is it good depth? What is it?
Yeah, Steve, I'm not sure we're going to know for sure how good this league is until the league goes out in the NCAA tournament and all these teams start playing teams from other leagues. I think we can guess. It looks to me like there's certainly teams that could go deep, but matchups, how are you playing, who's injured for your team, all those things are going to come into play. I think it's really good, 1 through 12. I mean, Minnesota is like 12th.
Right.
I mean, really? I mean,
Yeah.
they basically gave the game away last night against Maryland. They won. They had the game won. They outplayed them all night long. And that's a team that has beaten some good teams. It's played a brutal schedule. Certainly Purdue on the right night can be really good, and Purdue and Minnesota are the two teams probably out at the moment, trying to find their way in of the top 12. And I mean, Rutgers is 8 or 9. Ohio State is like in the middle of this league, and we know how good they can be. Michigan's playing great. So yeah, I just don't think there's a game where you go in there other than Nebraska and Northwestern at the moment and feel at all comfortable, whether you're home, road, or in Indianapolis in a week or so.
All right. When you look at the selection itself, Dick, you started out by giving some of the indications. You've been in the mock drafts, the mock selections. Now, each committee has its own way of doing it, but what are some of the basics that the fans should know about how they go about doing this?
So everything is done by each committee member starts pressing buttons. So there's they discuss, but there isn't, all right, well, let's make this team a 3 seed in the East. They vote on everything. I mean, literally everything. And it'll come down, sometimes it'll be team versus team, who's going to get a 3 seed, who's going to get a 4 seed. And it's a secret ballot. Nobody knows how anybody else is voting. So from that standpoint, you can feel fairly comfortable that there's no conspiracy theories or anything like that. But yeah, first of all, the biggest thing for the committee is to get the at-large pool. That's their biggest task. Who's just in, who's just out. Obviously, Penn State doesn't have to worry about any of that this year. They're strictly in a circumstance or where are they going to be seated, what region are they going to be in, and where are they going to start the tournament. And I would say today they'd probably be in the 3-4 range, and have a reasonable chance at playing in Albany. I think Villanova is probably ticketed for Albany. And as I look around the East, Penn State is probably in a battle with teams like Villanova and Seton Hall for that Albany spot.
Right.
Cleveland is actually closer to State College than Albany is. That's also a possibility. You get site preference depending on how high you're seated and who else is in that group with you. Let's say, for instance, is Michigan State in that group? Maryland is almost certainly going to go to Greensboro, where I'm sure all those ACC fans will be very happy to see the Terps.
In fact, you want to talk about warmly embraced.
Yeah, no, it's actually going to be that's the closest site to them. It's probably, and Duke will be down there too. That'll probably actually be a disadvantage for Maryland because all those ACC fans will be rooting against the Terps. So yeah, take a look at the sites around the country. I mean, look, I've seen things that it to me doesn't make a lot of sense. But when you have, let's say the Big Ten gets 10. When you have 10, there's certain rules that the committee has to adhere to. Like there will not be a Big Ten versus Big Ten in the first round. That's not going to happen.
Right.
And they try to separate teams that have played twice as long as possible. I mentioned on the broadcast last night, if Penn State does not play Wisconsin or Illinois in the Big Ten tournament, then there's a chance they could be lined up against either of them, depending on seeding situations, in round number 2. But they would never put Penn State and Michigan State in the same spot because they will have played each other twice. The earliest they could meet would be in the round of 8. All those things to just keep in mind, but it's a fun exercise to be in at this stage. And again, the best news for Penn State fans is they're way in, and right now have a really good seed possibility. And look, there's still 3 regular season games to go, and either hopefully three possibilities in the Big Ten, or 4, depending on where Penn State falls. That there's a chance for more wins. But right now, they're solidly 3 or 4 would be my guess. If it's today, it's not today, so we
Right.
got more games to go.
Right, exactly. There's also one program that's going to get its choice of what to do, and I don't think people realize this. The number 1 overall seed gets to pick where the region is.
Correct, and that's still in doubt.
Yes.
I think once Gonzaga lost to BYU the other night, I think that put Kansas in play for that. Assuming they finish out and then win the Big 12 tournament, I would think they would have their choice. I think St. Louis is a first-round site. I think that's the closest to KU. I'm not looking right at them at the moment, and I'm trying to remember the Midwest regional site.
Indianapolis. Indianapolis is the Midwest regional, and then Houston would be the other one that's closest to them, right?
Okay, so they would probably choose Houston, I would think. Is that closer to Kansas than Indianapolis?
Well, it's like there's like a 200, but this is where it becomes strategic. If they were to choose, say, Houston, that would mean Baylor couldn't go to Houston.
Yeah,
right? And that could actually come into play as to what they're thinking.
Yeah, no, that's the things that the committee has to deal with at that stage, right? Because Baylor's also likely a 1 seed, so it would knock them potentially out of that region. And again, for Penn State fans, if Penn State ends up getting in the East region, the regionals are at the Garden in New York, where Penn State has obviously had a lot of recent success. But you could go to Albany and then end up in L.A.
Right.
That you could be in the West region, but play your first 2 games in Albany potentially. You could play your first 2 games in Spokane and end up in New York.
Right.
I know that sounds crazy, but it's done by regions. But those first and second round games could be anywhere. And again, a lot of that depends on what other teams from your league are in. Right. How do you match up seed-wise? What the committee does, they seed it from 1 to 68. So let's say it's Villanova, Seton Hall, and Penn State for an East spot. It's gonna depend on which of those 3 teams is ranked the highest of that group. So again, if you're a Penn State fan at this point, I know it sounds crazy, you want to be rooting against Villanova and Seton Hall because they're in your region right now, and you want to see if you could get ahead of them. If it was today, the selections, to me, they're like almost dead even. I don't know how the committee would rank those 3 teams right now.
Yeah, I don't either. Once Myron Jones gets back, what will the distribution of minutes mean based on what we saw before he went out?
Yeah, I think it's everything, Steve, because the one thing that's become obvious in these 6 games that Myron hasn't played, they had that seamless 9-player rotation. Now it's down to 8, and it's not the same. Because players are playing more minutes. Yep. I think they got tired at the end of the Indiana game after the big run. I think after playing beautifully last night against Rutgers, they just hit the physical wall in the second half. Now, some of that was due to how well Rutgers played. They were great.
No doubt.
But I think if Myron's out there, then the domino effect on the whole team and the rotations changes, and he's especially valuable at the end of games. He's a really good free throw shooter, really good ball handler, and a terrific decision maker. And they have missed him in certainly the Illinois game, the Indiana game, and I think last night, and even the Minnesota game, where they had a big lead and lost it. And I think that's where you're looking over because he's in many ways been the closer.
Yep.
So, when Myron gets back, and the good news is he's coming back, and when he does, by tournament time, and I'm talking Big Ten tournament and then the NCAA, he should be back in great form. And that's where you want everybody in great form, that you play the regular season to get yourself in position for the postseason. And that's what Penn State has been able to do. And for them to go 4-2 in games without their second-best player, Steve, when would that have happened in recent
It never would have happened. 38 years, there is no way on the planet that Penn State could have lost its second-best player for a significant period of time and still be in the position they're in. I can say that unequivocally.
Yeah, and one of the things that's interesting, I actually sent an email off to Dave Warlock, who's the media relations person for the NCAA tournament, and he's in very close contact with the committee. And I explained to Dave what Myron's value was with the team, just so the committee would understand what had happened in the games that he's missed. And I didn't even realize how good some of his numbers were. until I went back over it. I mean, this is overall now, 46% from the field. This is for a point guard, shooting guard. 41% from three, 78 from the free throw line. And maybe my favorite stat, he's a 2-to-1 assist to turnover, and he has almost as many steals as turnovers, and averages 14 a game. He is having a phenomenal sophomore year. I hope because he's missed these games, he doesn't get overlooked for some Big Ten awards like a second team or a third team or something. He may because he missed the games, but anybody that's watched this team knows how valuable he's been to and how integral he's been to the success the team has had.
DJ?
Always a pleasure, Mr. Jones.
If you want to have a fun day, you have to drive a Hyundai from Sunbury Motors Hyundai. If an SUV is on your mind, Sunbury Motors Hyundai has the model for you. Save up to $2,835 on a Hyundai Kona, starting at $22,585. Sunbury Motors has 17 2020 Tucsons with savings as high as $4,077. If you're looking for a midsize SUV, test drive a Hyundai Santa Fe with a $4,571 discount. The 2020 Santa Fe starts at $26,552. Sunbury Motors Hyundai has 4 of the all-new Hyundai Palisades, starting at $34,200. All Hyundais come with America's best warranty, a 10-year, 100,000-mile powertrain warranty. And just announced, every new Hyundai comes with a 3-year regular maintenance plan. If you want to have a fun day in your next SUV, you have to drive a Hyundai. From Sunbury Motors Hyundai in the North 4th Street Auto Plaza, Sunbury.
Sunbury Motors.
All right, great to have you with us. Tomorrow's show's in Iowa City. Plane leaves at noon. Should be there in time to do the show. Kevo has already sent me the picks for the weekend.
You're all set?
Bob, thanks for being with us today. Appreciate you very much as always.
You're welcome, my good friend Steve.
Matt, great job. I'm glad we could do that piece on the Combine to make you happy, because your happiness really is our goal.
Yes, I appreciate it.
The 232 other questions you had about the Combine, I couldn't get to. It was a limited segment.